After Saw: The Final Chapter, the franchise found itself in a precarious position, returning in 2017 to a horror genre that had since surpassed it, leaving us with questions as to how it could take back the Halloween season from A24, and an abundance of remakes and reboots of beloved franchises of old. And it really didn't. Jigsaw tried to take the franchise into a new direction, but the producers handcuffed that film with its gimmicky, formulaic nonsense. Then Spiral decided to build off that, while branching into another new direction. But whether it be Chris Rock's self-insertion, the MPAA, or COVID affecting movie productions throughout the world, or more likely a combination of them all, the film was underbaked and predictable for keen Saw fans. Now, I obviously enjoyed both films to an extent, despite numerous faults, much like I enjoy every entry in the franchise despite their faults. But critics never had the guts to enjoy some fun for once, and normal audience members' opinion of the franchise had significantly waned. Saw X had so much riding on it, because one more underwhelming, under-delivering movie would send the franchise straight back into the abyss of obscurity. So, Saw X did the only natural thing: absolutely kill it. The original Saw was something so different for the horror genre that it spawned a huge following, yet it was only a mere introduction to the villain that we know as Jigsaw, with Saw 2 being John Kramer's real vault into icon status, where we build on the story of the first while seeing more of Jigsaw's malicious machinations. Saw X is set somewhere between the first and second movies, filling in gaps of chronology in ways that I didn't even know it needed. It's nice that it wouldn't require prospective Saw fans to try and piece together the tortuously elaborate timeline of Saw 3 onward, instead highlighting two of the most beloved characters of the franchise, John Kramer and Amanda Young, exploring their relationship dynamics together. I will say, setting this between Saw and Saw 2 certainly reduces the stakes of the film, since we know that they live to see Saw 2 and 3. But it doesn't take away from the gravity of the situation they find themselves in. I'm still on the edge of my seat. Like, what if they don't make it out? This is due in large part to Saw X harkening back to a meteor plot with heavy themes, while not distracting from it with a police procedural subplot. This is a Saw movie, yes, but above anything else, it's a John Kramer movie. And Tobin Bell acts his ass off. He's phenomenal, reprising the role of John, bringing the same gravitas that we're used to, while adding new depths to the most iconic horror villain of the 21st century. If the Oscars gave even the slightest damn about horror movies, I wouldn't be surprised to see Tobin Bell in the Best Actor category. But, of course, they don't, for whatever reason. It's tough for a movie to try and humanize someone that we know is the villain of the series, much less root for him. But Tobin Bell's empathetic performances managed to do so, providing some intriguing recontextualization for events of Saw 2 and onward. In Danse Macabre, Stephen King mentions that in many movies, the villain becomes the main focus and is glorified. However, in Saw X, it is more complex than that. Yes, the viewer is attached to John Kramer, but it also shakes your own moral, because, opposite to Stu Macher in Scream or Michael Myers in Halloween, John Kramer thinks that what he's doing is good. He doesn't enjoy killing, and as we saw from previous movies, he does not even kill by his own hand. He sees what he's doing as a second chance, as a redemption. More than the first half hour of this film is devoted to showing John's desperate attempt to beat his brain cancer, resorting to an experimental combination of surgery and medicine coming out of Norway that even the FDA won't approve. Not even his insurance company would help him, which we see in Saw 6, which I think is spiritually connected in its critique of Big Pharma. Seeing John have to grapple with his cancer, and by extension his morality, you really do start to feel for him. What I do like about the humanizing is that it makes John feel like a real person. A person who is absolutely flawed in his narcissistic nature, and how he points the finger at others and tests their will to live. But you learn why this is. And it's a known fact that he does this because he has a strange sense of authority because of his terminal cancer, which we knew from the start. But this film shows us the truly sad reality that drove him to this stage. And it's the performance that Tobin Bell gives, full of nuances and depths that almost make you feel bad for his character, that almost makes you root for him, despite everything. We know how twisted he is. In his logic, in his justification. I mean, just think about it. He put a domestic violence victim in a trap simply because she couldn't face up to her abuser. He is not redeemable, but he is still a human. A killer, but one with empathy. And it's all of the layers that build up to make this brilliantly complex character that fascinates us. Though Kramer is obviously at the center of this movie, the supporting cast elevate their scenes without Kramer to the same level, led of course by the lovely Shawnee Smith, back again as Amanda Young. And this is the perfect way to show what happened with Amanda between Saw and Saw 2. This is essentially her trial period of her Jigsaw apprenticeship. John and Amanda butt heads, endearingly embrace, and John entrusts Amanda with carrying on his legacy. And we see a torn, scared Amanda. Okay, now let's get this out of the way. They did her so dirty with this, Bob. I've seen so many people criticize the movie for not de-aging John and especially Amanda. But I respect their decision not to use the de-aging processes on the older actors, despite this chronologically taking place between the first and second movie around 18 years ago. I understand it's an issue for continuity, but I'm willing to accept that compromise in exchange for the actors not looking like uncalivanny androids, like the flashbacks from It Chapter 2. Amanda is still as fierce and beautiful as ever. I mean, look at her. This is my G.I. Jane right here. Also returning to the director's chair is Kevin Greutert. And what if I said Kevin Greutert is the best director in the franchise? What then, huh? I mean, he directed this and Saw 6, and he didn't even really want to be there for Saw 3D, so I'll give him a pass there. In Saw X, he really focuses on the most grounded and emotional plot in the series, giving each scene the right amount of room to thrive without dragging them out. There's a big reduction in the number of traps, and they are much simpler in construction, but more impactful, thus upping the gore-sodden intensity, making them effective emotion ringers, just as they had earlier in the franchise. But the cherry on top, however, is the players. Usually, the players in Saw films are disposable meatbags, waiting to be killed off in some gruesome ways. This time though, their personality does feel more grounded, or at the very least, more fleshed out this time, particularly the final player. There's a few nice twists here and there thrown in to spice things up, so the entire script does indeed feel fresh, in the same way that Saw 3 was. Also, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't even mention Charlie Clouser's score. Yes, of course, Hello Zepp returns again, inducing just as much hype as it did 20 years ago, but aside from that, the rest of the film score is beautiful, evoking every bit of emotion that this film desires. I have so much to say, but most of it would certainly go into spoiler territory, so we might as well begin the breakdown, the final one in the Saw franchise, for now at least. We open on John getting a CT scan, the cancer definitely taking its toll on him, so much so that he's attending a support group for other fellow cancer patients. In a meeting with his doctor, John finds out he has just months to live.
I still have a lot of work that needs to be done.
As John stops for a drink of water, he notices one of the hospital janitors rifling through a patient's belongings. He takes note of the device holding the patient's hand. The next thing we see is the hospital worker waking up in one of John's retribution contraptions, intending on addressing those sticky fingers of his. If he can willingly break his fingers, he will be set free. But if not, his eyeballs will be vacuumed out of their sockets. As he clicks the dial, each successive finger snaps at the knuckle, and we get a beautiful return to the jerky camera movements of old. When time runs out, his eyes are suctioned out, and his screams pervade the room. But this scenario was all in John's head, almost as if he was drawing up the schematics for it on the spot. When the worker notices John has been watching, he puts the atoms back, and scurries off. John goes to a cafe to sign his will, giving his belongings to Jill Tuck. But while there, he notices Henry Kessler, a man from his support group who has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Or at least he did, before learning of a groundbreaking new treatment coming out of Norway, from a Dr. Finn Peterson, a mixture of drugs and surgery. Henry lifts up his shirt to reveal a nasty looking scar, but can't recommend it enough. One problem though, it's not approved by the FDA, or really anyone. But just before he leaves, Henry leaves John with their website link. John goes home that night and researches more on this Finn Peterson, eventually reaching out to his daughter overseeing the operation, Cecilia Peterson. Later, he gets a call from her, who wants to get him into the next trial in 3 months' time. John remains silent. He knows he doesn't have 3 months, and Cecilia understands, giving John an alternative route in 1 week's time. He would have to travel to Mexico City, but after getting some more information, John flies to Mexico. And you know it's Mexico because it has the Breaking Bad filter. Hell yeah. Once he gets there, a taxi awaits him, driven by Diego, who shows him all over Mexico City, pointing out many historical sites, like the Metropolitan Cathedral, considered to be the highest echelon of craftsmanship, the Revolutionary Memorial, a mausoleum for heroes of the Mexican Revolution, the Angel of Independence, representing law, war, justice, and peace, and the sculpture of the Aztec god of rain, Tlaloc, envisioned mostly as a benevolent deity, with an irascible nature. When he was upset, passive-aggressively causing droughts, and when truly angered, would unleash deadly floods. Am I looking too far into their reference in the story, trying to connect each of these with John? Yeah, maybe. Diego and John take a back road, eventually getting stopped by a van, who holds him at gunpoint until he confirms his identity. These measures are a bit strict, but better safe than sorry, I guess? John walks up to the villa, greeted by Gabriella. She shows him to his room, and when he asks about Dr. Peterson, she says Cecilia saved her life, and goes to find her. At long last, John and Cecilia formally meet, and she gives him a tour of the grounds. where he sees Carlos, their local soccer star. In an old chemical factory lies the Gorilla Medical Facility, a bright white, sterile box of hope for John in this dingy, rundown building, and life. John meets with Mateo and Valentina, who will be aiding Cecilia in John's treatment, and Parker Sears, who's just finished his treatment for his thyroid cancer. Later, Cecilia asks John more about his life.
Now I have a few hobbies. I help people overcome inner obstacles, help them make positive changes in their lives.
Like a life coach, yeah?
Something like that.
The next morning, John appears restless, and investigates a hammering sound in the distance. It's Carlos, trying to fix his bicycle. Even with the strong language barrier, John manages to learn a new word, jalar, Spanish for pull, and he fixes the wheel. Now it's time for John's surgery, performed by the esteemed Dr. Ramon Cortez. And, like most brain surgeries, John will be awake during the procedure. As they begin digging around in his head, he catches the reflection of the procedure in the glass, watching every excruciating moment. Dr. Cortez has Valentina adjust the screen so he can't see. Which, kinda rude. I would want to watch my own brain surgery. Eventually, John wakes up in a nice comfy bed, as Dr. Peterson comes to check on him, giving him his latest blood work, which is looking a lot better. He looks out from the balcony, getting to start the rest of his life, which includes sitting in the park, sketching the rack that we saw Timothy Young fall victim to. John, you're gonna need that, no! Also, I know it's just his antibacterial bandage on his head, but it really looks like he's wearing a do-rag here, and that's really funny to me. John goes to the bodega to pick up a bottle of Código for Gabriela, since she graciously offered him some. But when he goes to deliver it, the door is wide open, and he doesn't find her. He doesn't find anyone there. As he looks for a clue as to what happened here, he finds the CD for Surgeons of Tomorrow, an instructional guide to neurosurgery, which shows an all too familiar sight. Not wanting to believe what may be, John removes his bandage, finding no sutures, finding no sign of any invasive procedure. Once the reality sets in, John becomes enraged, throwing the tequila on the ground. At night, he finds Diego's taxi and hops in back, and when Diego asks the destination, John simply replies,
Al infierno.
Diego wakes up tied to a pillar, his hands taped up holding two scalpels. As he cuts himself free, he triggers two devices wired into his forearms. A tape player falls in front of him, addressing him as Diego, aka Dr. Cortez, and that he wants to play a game. The devices attached to his arms are pipe bombs, but he should think of them more like cancer, a malignancy that must be cut out to survive. Before the bombs go off, Diego must cut the flesher on the galvanized cable in order to pry it out. Once he realizes all the exits are sealed, he begins slicing away, mangling his arm in order to get the cables out. And it's a gnarly scene. All of the traps and gore in this film are. Luckily, the MPAA has seemingly gotten more lenient in recent years with regards to gore. As I remember even for Spiral, scenes like Detective Fitch's game had to be cut down by mere frames at a time to try and avoid the dreaded NC-17 rating. In fact, I think it took something like 17 edits for Spiral to do that, and the gore in that wasn't even all that intense. Diego eventually gets both bombs out and kicks them away just in time. And once he does, John helps stop his bleeding. Say what you want about John's jigsaw, but he's willing to nurse those who complete their game, show the will to live, back to health. Valentina's living it up at the club when she leaves with a man, who later tries to sexually assault her, only being stopped when a brick flies through the window, knocking him out. Valentina's stunned long enough to be abducted from the car. She really can't catch a break here. Mateo's working late at the vet when Gabriela shows up looking for a fix. Mateo reluctantly obliges, and she walks off, as the barking dogs suddenly cease. As he walks down the hall, he's attacked by a cattle prod wielding pig. Too bad Gabriela's already gone, as she heads straight for the bathroom at the club. She goes into one of the stalls for a bit of privacy for her drug habit, when someone walks up to her stall. When they won't leave, she very smartly gets her pepper spray out, but when she looks back up, they're gone. Sufficiently scared, Gabriela goes to leave, only to get leveled by one of the stall doors, and the pig steps out, turning her pepper spray on her. Cecilia's minding her own business at home, counting up all the cash she's stolen from people, and setting up another round of the scam trials. She hears a noise from outside, immediately arming herself with a fire poker.
I've got a gun.
Lioness. She checks her security cams to see a figure on the roof, and they throw a rock through the ceiling, scaring her into her car. But before she can drive away, the pig is already waiting for her outside the garage. Oh, and one's in her backseat too, injecting her with something to relax the nerves. John's in the backseat, and the one and only Amanda Young is front and center. Hey girl.
Hi.
Amanda was the one who kidnapped all of those who wronged John so far, and now she's helping set up this international game of terror. Once they see John is behind it all, they try and reason with him, beg for forgiveness, or plead naivety, all of which fall on deaf ears, as John's already gone through the trouble to make the traps, so might as well use them. First up will be Valentina, as John says the key to her freedom is in this box. But there's no key, that's just a Geely saw.
He was speaking metaphorically.
Oh, right. As I was saying, Valentina is given a Geely saw, invented by Italian physician Leonardo Geely, which is a series of twisting wires that creates a clean cut, even through bone. While Cecilia doubts John would do this, he agrees. He won't, but Valentina might. He goes into university professor lecture mode, lamenting them taking advantage of the only thing dying people have left: hope. Hope is a very dangerous thing to hand out to human beings. So, when that gets taken away from you in an instant, you go crazy. Cecilia insists on keeping up the charade, but quickly shifts tone when John comes with the receipts. Millions of dollars stolen from 34 people over 8 years. John personally delivers the first game message to Valentina, saying she must harvest 3 ounces of bone marrow to avoid being decapitated by the Geely wire. If she hesitates, she dies. If she refuses, she dies. Cecilia cries that what John is doing isn't right.
Not right. The lecture in moral decency from you.
John and Amanda head upstairs to oversee the game take place. Once Valentina grabs the wire, her timer starts, giving her 3 minutes to complete her test. And she immediately goes into panic, only composing herself once Cecilia takes the de facto leader role, barking orders at her. She wraps the tourniquet around her thigh and begins using the saw, slicing through flesh, fat, hamstring, and eventually, bone. With just under a minute to go, she cuts through the last bit, and her leg falls to the wayside. She grabs the suction and puts it in her femur, collecting bits of marrow. But as the timer hits 0, she is just barely short of the amount she needed, and the Geely saw around her neck slices through. Cecilia can't bear to watch, the gravity of the situation she finds herself in setting in, and Valentina's head detaches from the rest of her body, falling limply to the ground out of focus. Gabby yells out at Cecilia, blaming her for getting her in the situation. Cecilia chirps back that she's not the one addicted to oxys. Amanda shoots a glance at John.
Sometimes we get sucked into things that are against our nature. Drugs are as vicious as they are powerful.
Amanda empathizes with Gabriella. She was Gabriella. John plainly remarks that she had her own free will, and if Amanda can't handle this, how can she handle the rest of their work? She doesn't believe she's ready to. She doesn't want to lose John. John assures her she is ready. Amanda doesn't believe Cecilia deserves a chance to prove herself.
Everyone deserves a chance. You should know that more than anyone.
A phone rings on the cart between the remaining 3, but none of them can quite reach it. They're gonna need a rope, and Cecilia crafts an absolutely wild plan, grabbing Valentina's body, cutting open her stomach, and using some of her intestine to wrap around the cart and pull it towards her. Cecilia grabs the phone and makes a call, but before she can finish a sentence, Amanda shocks her, causing her to drop the phone. When John re-enters, Cecilia resorts to begging, saying that she is a fraud, but her father is very accomplished, and can help him. But her cries once again fall on deaf ears, as John and Amanda head back up to their security room. While there, Amanda sees Parker Sears approaching, and he's upset with Cecilia too, drawing his gun. He encounters a pig-masked figure, shooting them down, only to find Valentina's head under the mask. Behind him, Amanda knocks him out with a blow to the head. When Parker comes to, he's tied to a chair in the cam room, being watched by Amanda. John asks the question that I'm wondering too.
What are you doing here, Parker?
I came to get my money back.
Much like John did, he found out that they're all crooks, and stole his money too. John shows him the screens, each of them showing the people that had wronged them. Parker gave Cecilia all the money he had left, all the money he had saved for his family. John affirms Parker traded it all for a shot at life, but petitions what is his life actually worth. John assures him he will get his money back. But first, there's a game that must continue. But before that, John makes sure to give Parker the rules. No guns. The consequences could be dire. Before they untie him, Amanda and John have a quick sidebar, and John promises it'll all work out one way or the other. John tells Amanda to go prepare Gabriella's game, but she calls an audible. Mateo is next. Mateo already doesn't like her, but Amanda doesn't have time for his outbursts, shooting him with the stun gun, incapacitating him. Gabriella begs for help, to which Amanda says she just did.
You don't know, John. If you want any more of my help, keep your mouth shut about that.
Mateo gets wheeled in on this BattleBot version of a jazzy scooter, and Billy rides in on his tricycle, delivering a tray of medical equipment and a tape for Mateo. This tape tells him that his game is simple. All he has to do is place a chunk of cerebral tissue into the glass enzyme tank. and if he does so in under 3 minutes, the enzymes will close the circuit, granting him access to the key. John once again reminds him that wasting time will ensure his death. As the timer begins, Cecilia once again tries to calm him down by guiding him through the procedure, as he grabs the craniotome and begins cutting into his scalp. We get some more of our manic editing of old, and it's absolutely perfect for capturing the intensity. Once Mateo finishes with the tool, he pries his skull open, exposing his brain. He picks around up there for a bit, eventually pulling out a chunk, placing it into the beaker. But, much like Valentina, he runs out of time, and the mask around him heats up, closing on his face, revealing the deity Tlaloc. After Mateo's death, we get a standout scene between Amanda and John, where John plainly states he is dying. His one chance at life, the acclaimed Peterson method, was ripped from under him. Amanda breaks down into tears, and John fights through his to let Amanda know he trusts her to carry on. They embrace, now both shedding tears. It's a beautiful scene, showing the depth of their relationship, further than mentor and mentee, more like a father and daughter. It contextualizes their dynamic seen in Saw 2 and particularly Saw 3, especially with some of Amanda's actions being answered already. With Dawn about to break, they still have 2 more games, and must continue on. John has Amanda free Parker, to see if he'll abide by John's rules. Billy sits next to Gabriella, with her tape around his neck. She grabs it, but the moment she hears his voice say,
I want to play a game,
she throws it to the side. John announces over the intercom that she will have to play the game no matter what, as her chains begin to get pulled up, lifting her off the ground, putting her face to face with a radiation machine. John laments them for their hoax cancer treatment, and now turns the heat up on them, as Gabriella starts getting cooked. In order to free herself, she must use the tool in front of her to break her ankle and wrist to get out of the shackles. Cecilia coaches her through, changing Gabby's mind when she's about to start with her hand, telling her that starting with the foot will swing her out of the way. Which, to her credit, it does, as Gabriella shatters her ankle and foot bones. She slides out, swinging away. But Cecilia's fallacious plan falls apart, as the radiation machine moves along the track to aim itself at Gabriella once again. It very well might have done the same thing if she started with her hand, but now when she breaks her hand, she falls directly on that broken leg. Also, just to bring up the clever use of score here, with each swing of the hammer, the strings play higher and higher notes, increasing the intensity. By the time she does break free, the radiation absolutely fries her. John tells Amanda to collect her and drop her off at the hospital, but before she can, Parker holds them up with the gun they confiscated. When he makes John stare down the barrel of the gun, Amanda finally gives up the keys for Cecilia's chains. As Parker walks over to Cecilia, it's evident that he's not here for revenge, but a rescue mission, as they share a kiss. When Amanda unlocks Cecilia's collar, she immediately backhands her, and Parker forces John into the same restraints.
New game. It's called We Live, You Die, Fuck You.
Amanda almost gloats to John that Parker failed his test. She knew he would. John is more worried about Gabriella. She needs medical attention, and fast. Cecilia, the doctor, gives her immediate treatment. It's heartbreaking for Gabriella. For Amanda. The climax here feels like the point of no return for Amanda in particular, who sees herself in Gabriella, and is very believably shattered when playing by the rules doesn't work out for her. It makes her descent in Saw 2 and Saw 3 more believable, because if people who fight for a second chance get screwed anyway, why would those who are less deserving have a chance at all? Parker makes Amanda lock herself in the shackle, stealing a glance at John, who gives an assuring show of strength. Cecilia walks over to John, bragging about being the one to stop John, but John blames it on a lapse of judgment. He also says that they still need to get the money back before they can split it, but Parker already knows where that is. Amanda makes sure to tell him that Cecilia will just kill him too. She's already shown her willingness to tie up her loose ends. Cecilia goes on a monologue about John, how he's going to die in one of his traps because he couldn't swallow his pride and admit defeat to her scam. Parker says that they should have put Amanda on the other side of the trap, but Cecilia has a better, much more evil idea, as she interrupts Carlos's practice outside, and straps him into the trap.
He's not a player in any of this.
Oh, come on, John. Do the scary voice. I'd like to play a game.
John quickly grabs Cecilia by the hair, but when Parker threatens Carlos, he releases her. In a last-ditch effort, John exclaims that it's not right for Carlos to be wrapped up in this mess.
Electoral moral decency from you.
John looks at Carlos, giving him the rules of the game.
No hala.
Parker hits the lever, and the chains retract to pull John and Carlos down, as the platform raises. 2 canisters drop down, releasing blood on the 2, essentially waterboarding them. John pulls the lever, taking the brunt of it all, sparing Carlos. But Carlos sees this, pulling the lever back towards him. This time, when John pulls his lever, he keeps a strong grip on it, making sure Carlos can't pull it back. Cecilia and Parker leave John to drown and go get the money back. But Parker brings up a good question.
But if you were the last player, who was supposed to be on the other side of that plank with you?
Cecilia obviously doesn't have time for such erroneous questions, grabbing the bag of money. But when she does, she pulls a pin, tripping the alarms. The blood pouring down on John stops. They find no money in the bag, just the same receipts of deceit, and the exit door shuts on them. Cecilia tries to shoot the door open, but pulling the trigger does nothing. John took all the gunpowder out of the bullets. They were never in danger of being shot by Parker. John and Amanda undo their shackles. They were never locked in them. Once Carlos is free, he and John embrace.
You are a warrior, my boy.
Cecilia asks Parker how they could have known about him, and turns out John managed to squeeze some extra information out of Diego. But the detective John called to track down the game's players couldn't track down Parker, so they had to get him there another way. When Cecilia got the phone to make a call, she called Parker, which led to his arrival, and all of the other pieces fell into place. A tape plays for Cecilia and Parker, playing out their scam, not realizing they were the marks all night long. A noxious gas starts leaking into the room, and their final game begins. They've worked together for years. Now they are working against each other. A vent opens up for them to stick their head through for a brief reprieve of fresh air, and the two fight it out, with Cecilia eventually coming out on top. I guess Amanda was right all along.
You know she's eventually gonna kill you too, right?
Cecilia sticks her head through the porthole, yelling at John as he walks away. He grabs the tote full of money, handing it over to Carlos.
Gracias.
They walk out of the building, leaving Billy behind, and leaving Cecilia behind, locked in the room, as the gas leak halts. I do find it weird that Peterson got the tamest trap though. Not sure what lesson she was meant to learn here. She screwed over someone else to benefit herself, the same as she's always done, and is rewarded for it. But that's not my decision. John's games were never meant to be unwinnable. Even if she's the most deplorable, detestable, downright evil person so far, maybe on par with Hoffman at least, she still won her game. And who knows, maybe she's reformed. Maybe if she gets out of this place, she returns to a life of helping people. Or maybe we'll see her and John meet again. John, Amanda, and Carlos walk into the warm sunlight, ready to continue their work together. But just when you thought this couldn't get any better, we get a mid-credit scene, wrapping up those loose ends of Henry Kessler, as we find him in the classic bathroom that we've grown so fond of. John thanks the detective for finding his fellow patient, and in steps Detective Mark Hoffman. Hell yeah. And Hoffman delivers his finest line in the series.
Out of all the men to cheat, you picked John Kramer? I call that epic bad luck.
Hell yeah, Mark, you get him. Rest in peace, Mark. You would have loved Reddit. Before Saw X, my yearly rewatch of the series always seemed to end on a bit of a dull note, with Jigsaw and Spiral. Both have their merits, but as a fan of the original 7, these failed reboots either pissed off fans or ignored them completely. Saw X truly feels like a part of the original 7, and it makes me so happy that they finally nailed one of these late sequels. It benefits from the longest runtime in the series, at just under 2 hours, but even then it feels like it's over before you know it, teasing you with the vacuum trap that is nothing more than a peek into John's mind, making you wait for the bloodshed to ensue. It builds the game's players up, giving us just enough insight into their lives to round them out, something group games of past have really failed to do. We build a connection to them. I feel most for Gabriella, as I see just as much of Amanda in her as Amanda does. The traps themselves are some of the more simple, but feel so much more intense since we actually get to see every bit of them. This gives all of our secondary characters so much more depth, adding weight to their inevitable deaths. And I hope this trend continues for all subsequent entries. Saw X will be the one to kickstart the Saw franchise's reclamation of the horror genre that we eagerly await for each year. We already have Saw 11 announced and in production, and if it's anything like 10, I'm excited for the future of the franchise, and I will be there for opening night every time. If this video didn't sell you on the beauty of this film, the 10th installment of a franchise written off time and time again, a deeply emotional and thematically rich narrative at the heart of a blood-soaked game, maybe you just don't get it. And may never get it. Maybe you just don't like fun, but maybe, just maybe, you can appreciate this experience, this beautiful piece of cinema. Thank you for watching.